Seeking shelter in the midst of the hurricane, he found a cave. And what was hidden changes everything. Brandon Mitchell ran desperately along the muddy trail while winds of over 100 kilometers per hour knocked down trees around him. Hurricane Katrina had arrived earlier than predicted in the mountainous region of Asheville, catching the young accountant by surprise during his morning hike. It was when the rain became even more violent that he spotted the dark entrance of a cave among the rocks. Brandon had never noticed that opening before, despite having explored every inch of those mountains during his childhood. The flashlight in his backpack illuminated damp walls that stretched deeper than he imagined possible. At the back of the cave, sheltered from the storm raging outside, Brandon stumbled upon something metallic buried under loose stones. His hands trembled as he discovered a rusty metal box sealed with old adhesive tape that crumbled at the slightest touch. Inside it, yellowed photographs showed his parents, Barbara and Richard Mitchell, alongside another couple in intimate moments he never knew existed. A letter, folded multiple times, revealed a truth that made his world collapse. The delicate handwriting of a woman said words he reread 5 times before accepting. "My dear son, if you find this box, know that I never wanted to give you up. Your parents did not tell the truth about how you came to them." Brandon sat on the cold stone, feeling his legs weaken. Each word of the letter revealed details about his origin that contradicted everything his parents had always said. He had not been abandoned on the doorstep of an orphanage, as he had always believed. He had been given up by a teenage mother who deeply loved a wealthy family from the area, but was forced to make an impossible choice. The photographs showed moments of affection between the two couples, genuine smiles that suggested a close friendship. In one of them, a young woman with long hair held a baby, while Barbara extended her arms to receive it. The date on the back marked exactly 26 years ago, confirming his worst suspicions. The storm outside mirrored the confusion in his mind. How could his parents have lied his entire life? Why did they invent a story about abandonment when the truth was completely different? Brandon held the letter to his chest, feeling tears mix with the dampness of the cave. Other letters in the box revealed a correspondence maintained for years between his biological mother and Barbara. The affectionate words between them contrasted with the version he had always known. His biological mother had not disappeared from his life due to abandonment, but because of an agreement he was only beginning to understand. A smaller envelope contained a birth certificate different from the one he had always seen at home. It listed the name Jennifer Parker as mother and David Harrison as father. The names meant nothing to Brandon, but the date and place of birth were exactly the same as those on his official documents. The address scribbled in the corner of one of the letters showed a street on the outskirts of Asheville that Brandon vaguely recognized. His mind worked fiercely, trying to remember where he had seen that name before, until the memory struck him like lightning. It was the street where the house of a woman was located that his adoptive mother visited sporadically during his childhood. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we are just starting out. Now continuing. Barbara always said she was visiting a sick friend, but never allowed Brandon to accompany her. Now he understood the real reason for those monthly visits that lasted hours. His adoptive mother had been in contact with his biological mother, hiding this fact from him all these years. The last letter in the stack was dated just 3 months ago. The handwriting, once firm and delicate, now showed signs of a tremor. Dear Barbara, I don't know if I can wait much longer. Each day it gets harder to live knowing my son is so close, yet I cannot hug him. Please tell him about me when you feel the time is right. Brandon closed his eyes tightly, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. His birth mother was not only alive, but had been living in the same city as him all these years. Barbara's visits weren't just to keep in touch. They were to bring news about him, so Jennifer would know how he was growing up. The wind howled at the cave entrance, but Brandon could barely hear anything over the noise of his own thoughts. 26 years of his life had been built upon a well-intentioned lie. His parents, who had always treated him with such affection and love, had hidden from him the existence of a woman who loved him from a distance. A smaller photograph showed Jennifer holding an ultrasound, tears in her eyes while Barbara held her hand. On the back, a dedication, "To the baby I will love forever, even if I cannot raise him." The date indicated the photo had been taken 2 weeks before his birth. Brandon began to understand that the story was more complex than a simple adoption. The letters suggested Jennifer had made a conscious yet painful choice to give her son to people she knew and trusted. There was no abandonment or rejection, but rather a sacrifice motivated by love. His fingers found a small key at the bottom of the box, along with a slip of paper indicating a different address, a house in the city center. The note explained, "The key opens a trunk in the back room of the house at 47 Flower Street. There are things I kept for you all these years." The revelation that more secrets were waiting for him made Brandon question how many other truths he had missed throughout his life. If his parents lied about his origin, what else had they lied about? What other parts of his personal history were well-intentioned fabrications? The hurricane began to lessen in intensity, but Brandon was in no hurry to leave the cave. He needed time to organize his thoughts before confronting Barbara and Richard with his discoveries. Anger, confusion and sadness wrestled in his chest, creating an internal storm as violent as the one happening outside. One of the oldest letters revealed details about the biological father Brandon never knew he had. David Harrison was described as a hard-working young man who loved Jennifer deeply but had mysteriously disappeared after learning of the pregnancy. Jennifer wrote about how she had waited for him, believing he would return to start a family. "David promised he would come back as soon as he found work in the capital," said one of the earliest letters. "He said he wanted to give our child a decent life. But it's been 4 months now and I haven't heard from him. I'm starting to believe something happened because he would never abandon me like this." The subsequent letters showed Jennifer's growing desperation as she tried to locate David. She had searched for him everywhere possible, asked friends and family, but he had simply vanished as if he never existed. It was during this period of despair that Barbara came into her life. Brandon discovered that Barbara worked at the hospital where Jennifer had her prenatal checkups. The two women had become friends during the medical appointments, and it was natural that Jennifer confessed her worries about raising a child alone. Barbara, who had tried to get pregnant for years without success, offered a solution that seemed perfect for both. "Barbara and Richard will be wonderful parents," Jennifer wrote in one of the most emotional letters. "They have financial stability, a beautiful home and more than enough love to give. It's better for my son to grow up with them than with me, a young single woman without resources, but I promise I will always love him." The decision had not been easy. The letters revealed nights of crying, constant doubts, and changes of heart that left everyone nervous. Jennifer gave up on the idea several times, but always came back to it when she thought about the uncertain future she could offer her son alone. What hurt Brandon the most was discovering that he had not been rejected. He had been loved too much. Jennifer had chosen what she believed was best for him, even if it meant her own suffering. Every line of the letters revealed a desperate mother trying to make the right choice. One particularly touching letter described the day of the birth. "I held Brandon in my arms for 2 hours. I sang to him, promised I would always protect him, even from a distance. When Barbara arrived to take him, I almost changed my mind. But I looked into her eyes and saw as much love as I felt. I knew I was doing the right thing." The letters after the birth showed how Jennifer struggled with depression and regret. She wrote about sleepless nights, wondering how Brandon was developing, if he was happy, if he missed her. Barbara responded with loving details about each of the boys' milestones, every smile and new word. "Brandon said Mommy today for the first time," Barbara wrote, in response to an anguished letter from Jennifer. "I thought of you in that moment and wished you could be here to hear it. I promise I will tell him about you when the time is right. He needs to know he had 2 mothers who loved him even before he was born." The promise had never been kept, and this discovery brought a new wave of anger for Brandon. Why hadn't Barbara told the truth as she promised? What had changed over the years for her to decide to keep the secret indefinitely? A more recent letter offered a clue to this question. Jennifer wrote about having seen Brandon on the street a few times, always accompanied by Barbara or Richard. She noticed how happy and well cared for he seemed, but also how he had grown up without even knowing of her existence. With each sighting, it became harder to imagine how to insert herself into his life without causing trauma. "Sometimes I think it's better to leave things as they are," Jennifer confessed in one of the last letters. "Brandon has a family that loves him, a stable and happy life. Who am I to appear and confuse him? Perhaps my love for him means staying in the shadows, protecting his peace." But other letters showed Jennifer fighting against this resignation. She wrote about dreams where she talked to Brandon, where he forgave her for giving him up, and where they could finally have a mother-son relationship. The dreams became more frequent over the years, suggesting her need for contact only grew. The correspondence also revealed that Barbara had gone through her own conflicts about the situation. In some letters, she wrote about the guilt of depriving Brandon of knowing his biological mother. In others, she expressed fear that the truth would destroy the family they had built so carefully. "Richard doesn't like it when I talk about telling Brandon the truth," Barbara wrote in a letter from 2 years ago. "He's afraid we'll lose our son, that Brandon will leave us to be with you. I try to explain that's not how it is, that a child can love more than one mother, but he can't understand." Brandon realized that the decision to keep the secret had not been Barbara's alone, but also Richard's. His adoptive father had apparently actively fought to keep Jennifer away from his life, possibly out of insecurity or possessiveness. This discovery added a new dimension to his anger. The last letter in the pile had been written just 1 month before Brandon found the box. Jennifer wrote about a worsening in her mental health, about how the depression was becoming unbearable. She mentioned having kept some things in the cave as a way to ensure Brandon would discover the truth if something happened to her. "If you are reading this, my son, it means you have finally learned about me. Don't blame Barbara and Richard for hiding the truth. They did what they thought was best. I also chose to let you go because I believed it was best for you. But now that you know, I hope we can meet." The letter included her current phone number and the address where she lived. Jennifer explained that she had moved closer to where Brandon lived, hoping to one day find the courage to look for him. She worked as a cleaner in a hospital, the same hospital where Barbara had been a nurse years ago. Brandon finally understood why that cave had been chosen to hide the letters. Jennifer wrote about how she used to take refuge in that place during her pregnancy, when she needed a moment of peace to think about the future. It was a special place for her, a place where she had made the most difficult decision of her life. The sun began to appear between the clouds, signaling that the storm had passed. Brandon knew he could no longer postpone the inevitable. He needed to confront his adoptive parents with his discoveries. But first, he needed to decide if he was ready to meet Jennifer Parker, the woman who had loved him from a distance his entire life. The walk back home seemed longer than ever. Each step brought Brandon closer to a conversation that would change his life forever. The letters in his backpack seemed to weigh a ton, loaded with 26 years of secrets and unspoken love. The house where he grew up looked different when he saw it in the distance. The yellow walls he had always considered welcoming now seemed like keepers of secrets. The well-kept garden where he played during childhood now represented a happiness built on well-intentioned lies. Barbara was in the kitchen preparing lunch when Brandon came in the front door. Her maternal smile faded when she saw her son's expression and the letters in his hands. She knew immediately that the moment she had feared for years had finally arrived. "You found Jennifer's letters," said Barbara, not as a question, but as a statement. Her hands trembled as she turned off the stove, preparing for the conversation she had mentally rehearsed 1,000 times, but for which she never felt ready. Richard entered the kitchen at that moment, home early from work because of the hurricane. The tension in the air was palpable when he saw the letters on the table and the look of despair on his wife's face. His first instinct was denial, but the evidence was undeniable. "Brandon, son, let me explain before you judge anything," said Richard, his voice revealing a mix of fear and determination. "Everything we did was out of love for you. Every decision we made had you as the priority." But Brandon wasn't ready to hear explanations. 26 years of lies couldn't be justified with good intentions. He wanted answers. He wanted to know why he had been deprived of knowing his birth mother, why he had grown up believing he was abandoned when in fact he was loved by 2 families. "Why did you lie? was all he could ask, his voice heavy with hurt. Why did you make up a story about abandonment when you knew she loved me? Why was I kept from knowing my own mother? Barbara began to cry silently, the tears she had held back for years finally finding release. Richard stood by his wife's side, but his defensive posture revealed he still wasn't fully remorseful for the choices they had made. The conversation that followed was the most difficult one of Brandon Mitchell's life. Each answer spawned new questions. Each explanation revealed additional layers of complexity in the situation. He discovered that his adoptive parents had also been victims of their own insecurities and fears. Barbara confessed that she had promised Jennifer she would tell the truth when Brandon was older, but Richard always found reasons to postpone. First, he was too young, then he was in crucial school years, then he was preparing for college entrance exams, and so life went on without the promise being fulfilled. I visited Jennifer every month, admitted Barbara between sobs. I brought her photos of you, told her how you were doing in school, in college, at work. She cried every time but said she was happy to know you were doing well. It was our way of keeping her part of your life without complicating yours. Richard revealed his part in the story more reluctantly. He admitted to pressuring Barbara to keep the secret because he feared losing the son he had raised. His insecurity about his own fatherhood had grown over the years, especially when Brandon started asking questions about his origin. I know it was wrong, said Richard, finally showing genuine remorse. But you are my son, Brandon. I raised you, taught you to walk, helped with your homework, was there for every important moment of your life. I was afraid that if you knew about Jennifer, you would see us only as temporary substitutes. The most painful revelation came when Brandon discovered that Jennifer had tried to re-establish contact several times over the years. She had written letters that Richard intercepted, had called when Brandon was at school, had even tried to meet him at the university. Each attempt was blocked by Richard, who convinced Barbara it was better to keep their distance. She almost gave up on living a few times, confessed Barbara, revealing the weight of the guilt she carried. I took her to the doctor several times when the depression got too strong. That's why I increased the frequency of my visits, to make sure she didn't do anything drastic. Brandon understood that the situation was more complex than he had initially imagined. There were no clear villains in the story, just people trying to do their best under difficult circumstances. But that didn't lessen his pain upon learning he had lost years of a relationship with his biological mother. The conversation was interrupted when the phone rang. Barbara answered with trembling hands and paled upon hearing the voice on the other end of the line. It was the hospital informing her that Jennifer had been admitted after fainting at work. The emotional stress of the last few months had taken its toll. She's asking for you, the nurse told Barbara. She keeps repeating the name Brandon over and over. The doctors think it might be important for her recovery if you come visit her. The news brought a new urgency to the situation. Brandon realized he could no longer postpone meeting Jennifer, especially knowing she was hospitalized, possibly because of him. The guilt he felt was unlike anything he had experienced before. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The three of them left for the hospital in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Brandon tried to imagine what it would be like to see Jennifer for the first time, while Barbara and Richard dealt with the guilt of having caused so much suffering to the woman who had trusted them 26 years earlier. St. Mary's Hospital was an old building in downtown Asheville, the same one where Brandon had been born. The irony was not lost on him. He was returning to the place where it all began to finally meet the woman who gave him life. The nurse led them to room 315, but asked that they enter one at a time to avoid causing additional stress to the patient. Brandon insisted on going first, feeling he had waited too long for this moment. Jennifer Parker was lying in the hospital bed, connected to machines monitoring her vital signs. Even weakened and with graying hair, Brandon could recognize in her the young woman from the photographs. Her eyes especially were exactly like his own. When she saw him standing in the doorway, Jennifer began to cry silently. Her hands reached out toward him, a gesture she had rehearsed in dreams for decades. Brandon approached slowly, feeling a mix of emotions he couldn't fully process. "My son," whispered Jennifer, her voice hoarse from crying. "You've grown so much. You're so handsome, so strong." "I always knew Barbara and Richard would take good care of you." Brandon held her hand, feeling the rough texture of someone who had worked hard her whole life. There was no anger in that moment, only curiosity and a strange sense of completeness he hadn't expected to feel. "Why did you never try to find me directly?" asked Brandon, his voice softer than he thought possible. "Why did you let others decide about our relationship?" Jennifer closed her eyes before answering, as if gathering strength to share truths she had kept for so long. "Because I was young and scared when I gave you up," she began. "Because I believed you would be happier without knowing a mother who couldn't give you a good life. And because, as the years passed, I became afraid that you would hate me for giving you away." The conversation revealed layers of insecurity Brandon hadn't considered. Jennifer hadn't stayed out of his life only because of the obstacles created by Richard, but also because of her own emotional limitations. She genuinely believed she didn't deserve to be part of the life of the son she abandoned. "I followed every stage of your life through Barbara," confessed Jennifer. "I know you were one of the best students in your class, that you played guitar at church, that you graduated in accounting with honors. I have a folder at home with every photo Barbara gave me." The revelation that Jennifer knew intimate details of his life brought a new perspective to Brandon. She hadn't been a distant stranger. She had been a secret mother, following his growth through reports and photographs, loving him from afar like an invisible guardian. When Barbara entered the room, the tension in the air was palpable. The two women looked at each other with a mixture of affection and guilt, each knowing they had failed in some way with Brandon and with each other. "Jennifer, I'm sorry I didn't keep my promise," said Barbara, her words heavy with regret. "I should have told the truth years ago. I should have been stronger against Richard's objections." "You took care of my son better than I ever could have," replied Jennifer. "I don't hold a grudge against you, Barbara. You were the mother he deserved to have. I just wanted him to know that I never stopped loving him." Richard's entry into the room brought a more tense atmosphere. Jennifer looked at him with a mixture of fear and resentment, while Richard clearly struggled with his own feelings of guilt and defensiveness. "Jennifer, Richard began, but couldn't finish the sentence. The apology he had rehearsed seemed inadequate in the face of the woman's obvious suffering in the hospital bed. "You were afraid to meet me," Jennifer said directly, her physical weakness not stopping her from confronting Richard. "You were afraid I would steal your son, but that was never my intention, Richard. I only wanted to be part of his life, not to replace you as his father." The conversation between the three adults who had shaped Brandon's life was painful and necessary. Richard was forced to confront his insecurities and admit that he had deprived his son of knowing his biological mother for selfish reasons. Dr. Anderson, the doctor in charge of Jennifer, interrupted the family meeting to update them on the patient's condition. He explained that she had suffered a severe anxiety attack that resulted in fainting and heart palpitations. The prolonged emotional stress had affected her blood pressure and heart function. "The patient is physically stable," the doctor explained, "but she needs psychological support to deal with the depression she has been facing. The family meeting can be an important part of the healing process, as long as it is conducted gradually and positively." Brandon realized that Jennifer had literally become ill from longing, that the weight of carrying him in her heart for 26 years had taken a real physical toll. This discovery brought a new urgency to his decision about how to proceed with the relationship. In the following days, while Jennifer recovered in the hospital, Brandon spent hours by her bedside, listening to stories about his childhood that he never knew. She talked about how she sang to him while pregnant, about how she chose his name because it meant strong king, about how she dreamed of the man he would become. "I used to imagine what kind of person you would be," Jennifer said during one of these conversations. "If you would be shy or outgoing, if you'd like music or sports, if you'd have my eyes or your father's. Finding out through Barbara that you became exactly the kind of man I hoped for was the greatest joy of my life." The mention of his biological father brought a new mystery to the surface. Brandon discovered that David Harrison, his biological father, had disappeared completely after learning about the pregnancy. Jennifer never knew what happened to him or why he never returned as he had promised. "David was a good man," Jennifer insisted. "He was happy when I told him about the pregnancy. He said he wanted to marry me and build a real family. It doesn't make sense for him to have just disappeared. Sometimes I wonder if something bad happened to him." The curiosity about his biological father became Brandon's new obsession. He began asking questions about David that Jennifer couldn't fully answer. Where did he work? Did he have family in other cities? Had he left any clues about his plans when he disappeared? Jennifer revealed that David worked in construction and had mentioned a job opportunity in the capital. He said he would return as soon as he got settled and could offer a better life for her and the baby. But weeks passed without any news, and then months, until Jennifer accepted she had been abandoned. "He left a few things at my place," Jennifer remembered. "Tools, some clothes, an old wallet. I kept everything hoping he'd come back for them. I still have those things stored away after all these years." The possibility of finding clues about his biological father in the things David had left excited Brandon. When Jennifer was discharged from the hospital 3 days later, he accompanied her to her simple home on the outskirts of the city to examine the belongings she had kept. Jennifer's house was small but well kept, with photographs of Brandon at every stage of life covering the living room walls. Seeing his own history documented so lovingly by a stranger who had turned out to be his mother was a surreal and touching experience. In the back room, Jennifer showed an old trunk where she kept everything related to David and the period of her pregnancy. Besides rusty tools and clothes that smelled of mothballs, there was a worn leather wallet containing David's personal documents. The ID showed David Harrison Cooper, born in 1975 in Chattanooga, a neighboring city of Asheville. There was also a work card signed by several construction companies and a piece of paper with an address scribbled in Chicago, accompanied by a phone number. "That was the address of the job he was going to get in Chicago," explained Jennifer. "He said it was a big construction project, that it would last years and pay very well. That's why he was so excited. He could finally give us the life we deserved." Brandon decided to investigate the address, even knowing 26 years had passed. He might not find David, but he could discover what had happened to him and why he never returned. The need to understand his full story had become irresistible. The trip to Chicago was made on a Saturday, with Brandon driving Jennifer's old car to the address indicated on the paper. The place had completely changed. Where there was once a construction site, now stood a modern shopping center. An older employee at the mall vaguely remembered the original construction and directed Brandon to the office of the company responsible for the project. After much insistence and explaining his personal situation, the manager agreed to check the company's old files. "David Harrison Cooper," murmured the manager, flipping through yellowed papers. "Yes, here it is. He was hired in March 1999 but never showed up for work. The position ended up being given to another employee." The revelation that David had gotten the job but never showed up added a new mystery to the situation. If he had been accepted, why didn't he go to work? What could have prevented a man eager for financial stability from attending his dream job? The manager found more information in the files. David had provided as a reference a boarding house in Chicago, where he was staying temporarily. The address still existed, although the boarding house had changed owners several times over the years. The current owner of the boarding house was a woman of about 70 who vaguely remembered David. She said he had stayed only a few nights, seeming nervous and anxious, before disappearing without paying the bill or collecting his few belongings. He received strange phone calls, the woman recalled. He would get very agitated after the calls. One night I heard him arguing with someone on the phone, talking about not being able to go back home. He left the next day and never came back. The mysterious calls suggested that David had faced some kind of threat or pressure that prevented him from returning to Jennifer. Brandon began to suspect that his biological father's disappearance had not been a choice but a necessity. The investigation into David became an obsession for Brandon. He spent weeks searching for records, visiting old police stations, talking to people who might have known his biological father. Every clue led to dead ends, but he couldn't give up. It was during one of these searches that Brandon discovered something that would completely change his perspective on the story. In an old records office in Chattanooga, he found documents showing that David had gotten into trouble with loan sharks a few months before meeting Jennifer. The documents indicated that David had incurred a significant debt to help a sick brother and was being pursued by debt collectors when he decided to flee to Chicago. The move to another city wasn't just for job opportunities, but also an attempt to escape his creditors. David was desperate to start a new life, explained a former co-worker that Brandon managed to locate. He always talked about a pregnant girlfriend and how he wanted to be a good father, but he was also very afraid of the men chasing him because of the debt. The former co-worker revealed that David had managed to save part of the money needed to settle the debt, but the interest had grown faster than his ability to pay. The collectors had threatened not only him, but also anyone close to him they could use as leverage. "He told me he couldn't go back to his girlfriend until he solved the problem," the co-worker continued. "He was afraid they would harm her and the baby. That's why he decided to stay away until he got the full amount." The discovery that David had distanced himself to protect Jennifer and Brandon added a new dimension to the story. He hadn't abandoned his family out of cowardice or lack of love, but rather a distorted sense of protection. He believed that keeping his distance was the only way to ensure the safety of the people he loved. But the question persisted. Where was David now? Had he managed to resolve his financial problems? Was he alive? Did he have a family? Did he know there was a son looking for him? Brandon felt he needed these answers to find peace about his origins. The search for David led Brandon to hire a private detective specializing in missing persons. The professional warned that finding someone who had disappeared more than 2 decades ago would be extremely difficult, but agreed to try using modern databases and updated investigation techniques. While waiting for the investigation results, Brandon focused on building a relationship with Jennifer. They began meeting regularly, always accompanied by Barbara to facilitate the transition. Sunday lunches became gatherings of 3 people trying to build a family dynamic, delayed by decades. Jose's presence at these meetings was still tense. He participated at Barbara's insistence, but clearly struggled with feelings of jealousy and fear of being replaced. Jennifer, in turn, made visible efforts to reassure him about her intentions. "Richard, I don't want to take anyone's place in Brandon's life," Jennifer said during one of these encounters. "You are his father. You raised him. You taught him how to be a man. I just want to be a special friend, someone who can love him in a different way." Gradually, Richard began to understand that Jennifer's love for Brandon did not diminish the love the young man felt for him. The family dynamics were expanding, not being replaced. With each meeting, the tension eased a little more. Brandon discovered that he genuinely enjoyed Jennifer's company. She had a dry sense of humor that he recognized in himself and a way of seeing the world that complemented his personality. It wasn't just a biological connection. It was a real affinity between 2 people who could have been friends under any circumstances. 3 months after the first meeting at the hospital, the private detective called with news about David. He had found death records for David Harrison Cooper, dated 2001, just 2 years after his disappearance. The cause of death was a workplace accident at a construction site in Washington, D.C. The news devastated both Brandon and Jennifer. Both had secretly nurtured hopes of an eventual reunion with David, of completing the biological family puzzle. Discovering that he had passed away over 20 years ago brought a different kind of grief, mourning for someone you never had the chance to know. "He was trying to save money to return," said the detective, based on information he had managed to gather. Records show he was sending small monthly amounts to a bank account here in Asheville. Apparently he was trying to pay off his debt so he could resume a normal life. The discovery that David had continued trying to resolve his problems to return to Jennifer brought a mix of comfort and sadness. He hadn't given up on the family. He had been interrupted by tragedy before he could complete his plans. Jennifer cried for days upon learning the truth about David. 25 years of resentment and feelings of abandonment turned into mourning for a love that never had the chance to fully blossom. She realized she had carried unjustified anger for so long. "I always knew something was wrong," Jennifer said during a particularly emotional moment. "David truly loved me, I felt it. It never made sense for him to simply give up on us. Now I know he didn't give up. He was prevented by fate." The discovery about David brought Brandon and Jennifer even closer. They had lost the chance to know him, but now they could honor his memory together. Brandon decided to visit David's grave in Washington, D.C., and Jennifer insisted on accompanying him. The trip to Washington, D.C. was a healing journey for both of them. At the cemetery, they found a simple headstone with only David's name and his birth and death dates. There were no flowers or signs that anyone visited the grave regularly. "He died alone," murmured Jennifer, placing a bouquet of white flowers on the headstone. "He died thinking he had failed us, not knowing that we loved and understood him." Brandon felt a strange connection to the father he never knew. Looking at the headstone, he could imagine a young man battling impossible circumstances, trying to do the right thing but being defeated by fate. It was a tragedy, but also a story of love and sacrifice. The visit to the grave brought a closure neither of them expected. Jennifer was finally able to say goodbye to the love of her youth, and Brandon was able to honor the father he never had the chance to know. Together, they promised that David would be remembered and honored in the family that was forming. The return from Washington, D.C. marked a new phase in Brandon's relationship with his two families. He had completed the puzzle of his origin and could now focus on building healthy relationships with everyone involved. Barbara and Jennifer began to develop a genuine friendship, united by the common love they felt for Brandon and the shared experience of mothering the same son in different ways. They started meeting independently of family gatherings, developing their own connection. Richard took longer to adjust to the new dynamic, but gradually began to see Jennifer as an extension of the family rather than a threat. When she casually mentioned having financial difficulties, it was Richard who insisted on helping her, offering to handle her taxes and personal finances. "Jennifer is family now," declared Richard during a dinner, surprising everyone with his statement. "If Brandon considers her his mother, then she is my family, and I take care of my family." Richard's acceptance marked the true integration of the families. Brandon now had three parents working together for his well-being, each contributing their unique skills and perspectives. It was an unconventional dynamic, but it worked. Brandon decided to move to a larger apartment so he could comfortably host his families. Barbara helped him with the decoration, Richard handled the financial and accounting aspects, and Jennifer contributed with manual labor, painting walls and organizing furniture. Seeing the three of them working together in his new home brought Brandon a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. It wasn't just that he had discovered his origin, it was that he had created a new definition of family that included everyone who loved him. The first Christmas celebrated with the expanded family was memorable. Brandon decorated the tree with ornaments that represented his journey, old photographs that Jennifer had kept, childhood mementos that Barbara had preserved, and a new picture of the four of them together that Richard had insisted on taking. During dinner, Brandon made a toast that summarized his journey. "A year ago, I thought I had one family. Today I know I always had two families, and now I have three people I can call parents. I've learned that love doesn't diminish when it's divided. It multiplies." The tears that streamed down Barbara's, Richard's, and Jennifer's faces were of pure happiness. Each had feared losing Brandon by revealing the truth, but they discovered that honesty had created even stronger bonds. The following year brought unexpected developments. Jennifer, now with her mental health stabilized and surrounded by the love of the expanded family, began to show romantic interest in a co-worker. At first, she felt guilty, as if loving someone else was a betrayal of David's memory. Brandon and Barbara encouraged her to embrace this new opportunity for happiness. "David would want you to be happy," Brandon argued. "He sacrificed his own life, trying to create a better future for us. The best way to honor him is by living the life he wanted us to have." Jennifer's relationship with Walter, a gentle widower her age, developed slowly and naturally. He was gradually introduced to the expanded family and adapted surprisingly well to the unconventional dynamic. His own experience with loss and second chances made him especially understanding. 2 years after the reunion, Jennifer and Walter married in a simple ceremony in Barbara and Richard's backyard. Brandon had the honor of escorting his biological mother down the aisle, fulfilling a role he never imagined he'd have the chance to perform. Walter's presence in the family brought a new masculine dimension that complemented Richard's influence. While Richard had been the practical, providing father, Walter became a more philosophical figure, someone with whom Brandon could discuss existential and philosophical questions. With each passing month, the family became more integrated and natural. Sundays at Barbara's house became a tradition, with Jennifer and Walter always present. Conversations flowed easily, laughter was genuine, and moments of tension became increasingly rare. Brandon began working as an independent financial consultant, using the skills Richard taught him and the emotional sensitivity he had developed through his personal journey. Many of his clients were families going through complex transitions, and he discovered he had a special aptitude for mediating difficult family situations. His work became an extension of his personal experience. Every family he helped navigate divorce, adoption, or generational conflicts benefited from the lessons he had learned about honest communication, forgiveness, and flexibility in defining family. 3 years after discovering the letters in the cave, Brandon returned to the location with his expanded family. Together, they removed the original box and replaced it with a new one, filled with photographs of the happy moments they had shared since the reunion. "This cave is where our true family was born," Brandon said as he placed the new box in its spot. "When I found those letters, I thought my life was being destroyed. Now I know it was just beginning." Barbara, Richard, Jennifer, and Walter joined in a collective hug that symbolized the journey they had traveled together. From a well-intentioned lie had been born a truth more beautiful than any of them could have imagined. The family decided to make the date an annual celebration, returning to the cave each year to add new memories to the box. It was their way of honoring both the tears and the joys that place had witnessed. The 4th year brought news that Barbara was facing age-related health problems. At first, everyone mobilized to care for her, but it was Jennifer who insisted on being the primary caregiver, claiming it was her turn to repay the years of care Barbara had shown. "You cared for my son when I couldn't," Jennifer told an emotional Barbara. "Now let me care for you. It's the least I can do for everything you've done for us." The months of care brought the two women closer in a way that surprised everyone. They developed an intimacy typical of sisters, sharing secrets, laughter, and worries in a way that transcended their complicated history. Barbara recovered completely, but the experience had solidified the family bonds definitively. Any lingering tension or jealousy had disappeared, replaced by genuine love and mutual concern. Brandon watched these interactions with admiration and gratitude. His journey to discover his origin had resulted not only in answers, but in the creation of a family stronger and more united than many conventional families he knew. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuing. The 5th year after the discovery brought an unexpected surprise. During a general cleaning at Jennifer's house, Walter found a box hidden in the attic containing more letters. This time letters that David had written to Brandon, but never sent. The letters revealed the depth of David's love for a son he barely knew. On yellowed pages, he wrote about his dreams for Brandon's future, his hopes of teaching him masculine skills, his determination to be a better father than his own father had been. "My son," one of the letters said, "if you ever read this, know that each day away from you is agony. I am working day and night to resolve the problems that kept me away from you. I promise I will return to get you and your mother as soon as it is safe." The discovery of David's letters brought a new wave of emotion to the family. It was like receiving a posthumous message from a man who had been only a mysterious figure in their history. Now he became real, three-dimensional, with tangible dreams and fears. Brandon decided to organize a special ceremony to honor David's memory. He gathered the family in the cave where it all began and read excerpts from the letters aloud, allowing David to finally meet the family he had always wanted to have. "David, you could never be present in body, but you were always present in spirit," Brandon said to the wind blowing at the cave entrance. "Your absence created the space that allowed other people to love me, but your love remained the foundation of who I became." The ceremony brought a final closure to Brandon's journey. He had honored both the mother who gave him up and the father who fought to return, as well as the parents who raised him with dedication. His story was complete, not because all questions had been answered, but because he had found peace with the answers available. In the following years, the family continued to grow and evolve. Jennifer and Walter informally adopted a teenager whose parents had passed away, further expanding the unconventional definition of family they had all embraced. The teenager, Emily Rose, brought new energy to the family dynamic. She quickly grew fond of Brandon, who became the older brother she never had. Barbara and Richard welcomed her as a granddaughter, while Jennifer and Walter provided the parental stability she needed. "Our family is like a patchwork quilt," Emily Rose observed during one of the Sunday dinners. "Different pieces stitched together, but they create something more beautiful than any single piece could be on its own." The teenager's observation perfectly captured what everyone felt about their expanded family. They had learned that family is not defined solely by blood or traditional roles, but by love, commitment, and the conscious choice to stay together. Brandon established a tradition of telling the family story to Emily Rose, explaining how each member had come to the group and contributed to the current dynamic. She listened with fascination, especially the part about discovering the letters in the cave. "Do you think there's something hidden waiting for me too?" asked Emily Rose with teenage hope. "Some mystery about my origin that will magically appear." "The mystery of your origin is that you chose to be here with us," Brandon replied wisely. "Sometimes the best discoveries aren't about the past, but about the present and future we consciously create." Brandon's wisdom had grown through his journey. He became a source of advice for friends and clients facing their own family dilemmas, always emphasizing that honesty and flexibility were keys to healthy relationships. His family consulting business thrived, allowing him to help dozens of families navigate complex transitions. Each case reminded him of his own journey and the importance of approaching family conflicts with compassion and an open mind. 10 years after discovering the letters, Brandon was invited to speak at a conference on modern family dynamics. His lecture, titled "When Well-Intentioned Lies Create Beautiful Truths," was met with enthusiastic applause and tears from the audience. "I learned that family is not a static concept," he told the packed room. "It's a living entity that can grow, change, and adapt when treated with love and honesty. My family multiplied when it stopped trying to hide from the truth." The lecture resulted in invitations to other conferences and opportunities to write about his experience. Brandon decided to channel these opportunities to create a foundation that would help adoptive families maintain healthy connections with biological families when appropriate. The David Harrison Foundation, named in honor of the father he never knew, started small but grew quickly. Barbara contributed her healthcare experience, Richard his financial management, Jennifer her direct work with families, and Walter his emotional counseling. Emily Rose, now a young adult studying psychology, became a volunteer for the foundation during her college breaks. Her perspective as someone who had experienced loss and family reconstruction was valuable to the families served. The foundation mediated over 50 successful adoption cases in its first 3 years, always prioritizing the children's well-being while keeping communication channels open between all involved parties. "Every child deserves to know their full story," became the foundation's motto. "Our mission is to ensure truths are told in a loving and age-appropriate way." The foundation's work brought national recognition to Brandon and his family. They were featured on television programs, magazines, and documentaries as an example of how unconventional families can function harmoniously. But for Brandon, the true success wasn't in the public recognition, but in the Sunday dinners where his family gathered to laugh, argue, and simply enjoy each other's company. These gatherings became the heart of his life. During one such dinner, 15 years after the initial discovery, Barbara made an announcement that surprised everyone. She had decided to write a book about her experience as an adoptive mother, focusing especially on the dilemma of when and how to reveal difficult truths to adopted children. "I want to help other adoptive parents avoid the mistakes I made," explained Barbara. "My intention was always to protect Brandon, but we almost caused more pain by keeping secrets. Other families can learn from our experience." Barbara's book, Love and Truth: An Adoptive Mother's Journey, became a bestseller in the niche of adoption books. Her brutal honesty about her own mistakes and fears resonated with thousands of parents facing similar dilemmas. The book's proceeds were entirely donated to the David Harrison Foundation, allowing them to expand their services to include support groups for adoptive parents and workshops on honest family communication. Jennifer contributed to the book with a chapter on her perspective as a birth mother, describing her emotional journey from placing the baby to the reunion. Her courage in sharing intimate details helped many women who had gone through similar experiences to seek support. Richard, initially reluctant to appear in the book, ended up writing an honest appendix about his fears and insecurities as an adoptive father. His admission that he had acted out of possessiveness rather than protection was particularly valued by readers. The book's success led the family to be invited to a national television program where each member could tell their perspective of the story. The program aired on a Sunday night and broke viewership records. "You have shown the country that family is about choice, not just biology," said the host during the program. "Your story gives hope to thousands of families who are struggling with similar issues." The viewer letters that arrived after the program confirmed the impact the story had caused. Hundreds of families wrote about how the honesty of Brandon's family had inspired them to address their own secrets and family conflicts. One particularly touching letter came from a teenager who had recently discovered she was adopted. "You showed me that finding out the truth about my origin doesn't have to destroy my family. I can love my adoptive parents and be curious about my birth parents." Responses like this reinforced Brandon's decision to continue sharing his story publicly, despite the occasional discomfort with the attention. He realized that his experience had become bigger than his family. It had become a source of hope for others. 20 years after finding the letters in the cave, Brandon returned to the location with his own twin children, born from his marriage to a psychologist he met through the Foundation's work. The twins, David and Nathan, named in honor of the biological grandfather they never knew, and the half-grandfather Jennifer, listened to the cave story with the wide-eyed wonder of children hearing a real-life fairy tale. "Daddy, you were like a detective," said David, the more imaginative of the twins. "You found secret clues and discovered your lost family. It's like in the movies." "It wasn't exactly like in the movies," laughed Brandon. "It was more difficult and emotional, but it had an even better ending than any movie." Nathan, as practical as his grandfather Richard, asked if the letters were still in the cave. Brandon explained the family tradition of adding new memories to the box each year, showing the children how some traditions can evolve and grow. "One day you might add your own memories to the box," said Brandon. "But I hope you never need to search for your origins. You will always know the truth about our family." The promise of total transparency with his own children was one of the most important lessons Brandon had learned. The twins grew up knowing the full story of their expanded family, treating great-grandmother Barbara, great-grandfather Richard, grandmother Jennifer, and grandfather Walter as natural parts of their lives. To them, having multiple grandparents was normal, not exceptional. They didn't question why their family was larger than that of other classmates. They simply enjoyed the extra love available at every family gathering. The normality with which the twins accepted their complex family proved to Brandon that honesty from an early age created natural acceptance. There was no drama or confusion when the truth was presented as a fact of life rather than a revealed secret. During the 20th anniversary of the discovery, the family organized a special celebration at the house Brandon had bought specifically to accommodate large gatherings. The event included not only the immediate family, but also many of the families who had been helped by the Foundation over the years. "You taught us that scars can become bridges," said an adoptive mother during the celebration. "Our daughter now has healthy relationships with both her families because we followed your example." The impact of Brandon's story had spread far beyond his own experience. Dozens of families had found healing and reconciliation using the lessons he had learned through his own painful but transformative journey. Emily Rose, now a licensed psychologist specializing in family therapy, had become the clinical director of the Foundation. Her own experience of being welcomed into the expanded family made her especially effective in helping other children and adolescents navigating family changes. "Brandon taught me that family is a verb, not a noun," she said during a speech at the celebration. It's something we actively do every day, not something we simply are by accident of birth. Emily Rose's wisdom reflected how the unconventional perspective on family had influenced her own professional philosophy. She approached each case with the flexibility and openness she had learned growing up in a family that defied traditional definitions. As the evening progressed, Brandon found a quiet moment to reflect on the journey that had begun in a cave during a hurricane. The desperate young man who had found the letters could hardly have imagined the expansive family and positive impact that would result from that painful discovery. Barbara and Richard, now in their 80s, remained active in family life and the Foundation's work. Their willingness to face their past mistakes and embrace a new family dynamic had become an inspiration for younger couples. Jennifer and Walter had celebrated 10 years of marriage the previous month, a simple but joyful ceremony where Brandon once again had the honor of escorting his biological mother. Their journey from pain to healing and new love demonstrated that it's never too late for second chances. The twins ran through the house, playing with the other children present at the celebration. For them, this gathering wasn't about overcoming past tragedies, but simply a normal party with their extraordinarily large and loving family. "Can you believe all this started because you got lost in a storm?" asked his wife, Rachel, as they watched their children play. "I didn't get lost," corrected Brandon with a smile. "I found myself. The storm just took me where I needed to be." Brandon's perspective on that day had evolved over the years. What initially seemed like a catastrophe had revealed itself as a blessing in disguise, a necessary redirection that had taken his life in richer directions than he could ever have imagined. As the celebration continued around him, Brandon made a silent promise to himself. He would continue honoring Paulo's memory by living transparently, loving abundantly, and helping other families find healing through truth. The box in the cave now held 20 years of family memories, photographs of weddings, graduations, births, celebrations, and everyday moments that built a life full of meaning. Each edition represented not just an event, but a layer of love consciously built. "Thank you, David," whispered Brandon, looking at the sky. "Your absence created space for so much love. Your memory continues to bless our family every day." The gentle night wind seemed to carry an answer, a whisper of approval and gratitude that only Brandon could hear. His journey had begun seeking answers about the past and had transformed into the active creation of a future full of possibilities. The next morning, the family gathered one last time before the out-of-town guests departed. Breakfast was a chaotic mix of simultaneous conversations, children's laughter, and the familiar comfort of people who know each other deeply. "When are you all going to add someone else to the family?" joked one of the guests, making everyone laugh. "Our family grows naturally," Jennifer replied wisely. "When someone needs us or we need someone, the heart has room for everyone." Her answer perfectly captured the philosophy that had guided the family's expansion over the years. There was no forced or artificial growth, but rather an organic welcoming based on mutual need and genuine love. As the guests said their goodbyes, each carried away a piece of the wisdom they had witnessed. Brandon's family had become more than an example of overcoming. It had become a model of how love can transcend traditional structures when approached with honesty and flexibility. Brandon himself continued to evolve as a person and a professional. At 46, he had found his purpose not only in his own healing, but in facilitating healing for others. Every family he helped was an extension of his own journey. His books on family dynamics had become reference texts in psychology and social work courses. Universities regularly invited him to lecture, always interested in his unique perspective on how family secrets can be transformed into bridges instead of walls. "The truth may hurt temporarily," was one of his favorite refrains during lectures, "but lies hurt forever, creating wounds that fester and spread. Healing always begins with honesty." His message resonated especially with professionals working with families, offering practical tools for navigating difficult conversations about adoption, separation, and family reconciliation. The David Harrison Foundation had helped over 500 families in its 15 years of operation. Each successful case validated Brandon's belief that love and truth, when combined with patience and understanding, can overcome almost any obstacle. One of the most touching stories involved a teenager who had been adopted by a family after years in orphanages. When she discovered her biological mother was alive but addicted to drugs, the foundation mediated a gradual reconnection process that included treatment for the mother and therapy for both. 2 years later, mother and daughter had developed a healthy relationship that complemented, rather than competed with, the teenager's relationship with her adoptive family. The biological mother was sober and working, while the teenager had found peace about her origins. "You gave me back my daughter," said the biological mother during a foundation ceremony. "But more importantly, you gave me back myself. Knowing she was safe and loved gave me the motivation to recover." Stories like this fueled Brandon's passion for the work. Each happy ending reminded him that his own painful experience had served a greater purpose, creating waves of healing that extended far beyond his immediate family. The twins, now 8 years old, often accompanied Brandon to child-appropriate foundation events. They had developed a natural understanding about different types of families and often offered surprisingly mature perspectives to the children served. "It doesn't matter how many mums or dads you have," Nathan said to a girl confused about her adoption situation. "What matters is that they love you. I have 4 great-grandparents and 2 grandfathers and 1 grandmother, and they all love me differently." The twins' natural wisdom about complex family dynamics demonstrated how children raised with total transparency develop emotional resilience and flexibility that serves them well throughout life. Rachel, Brandon's wife, had initially worried about the complexity of marrying into such an expanded family, but quickly discovered that more love just meant more support. During the twins' pregnancy, she had 5 people caring for her in organized shifts. "At first, I thought it would be complicated to have so many opinions on how to raise the children," Rachel confessed during a magazine interview. "But I found that having multiple wise perspectives actually makes parenting easier, not harder." Her testimony helped other spouses marrying into expanded families see the benefits rather than just the challenges. The key, according to her, was establishing clear but flexible boundaries from the start. The 25th anniversary of the cave discovery was marked by the publication of a collaborative book written by the entire family. Each member contributed a chapter about their perspective of the journey, creating a complete mosaic of experiences and lessons learned. The book, Caves and Revelations: How Secrets Turn into Bridges, became instantly popular among families facing similar challenges. The multiplicity of voices offered something for every type of reader, regardless of their role in the family dynamic. Barbara wrote about the guilt and fear that motivated her initial decisions, offering valuable insights for other adoptive parents struggling with similar issues. Richard contributed reflections on masculinity and fatherhood, exploring how men can overcome insecurities to embrace unconventional family dynamics. Jennifer shared her journey through depression and recovery, offering hope to other mothers who had placed children for adoption. Walter wrote about finding love later in life and accepting being part of a story that began before he knew the family. Emily Rose contributed a professional psychological analysis of the family dynamics, translating the emotional experience into clinical terms that could help other professionals. Rachel offered the perspective of someone who married into an already formed family. Brandon wrote the introduction and conclusion, tying all perspectives into a coherent narrative that highlighted the universal themes of love, loss, healing, and growth. His writing style had matured over the years, combining emotional vulnerability with practical wisdom. The twins, though too young to write chapters, contributed drawings and observations that were included throughout the book. Their innocent perspectives offered moments of lightness that balanced the heavier themes. The book launch coincided with a national conference on adoption, where the entire family was invited to speak. For the first time, all members appeared together on stage, visually demonstrating the harmony they had achieved. "You represent the future of American families," said the conference organizer during the introduction. "You show that love is stronger than convention, that truth is more powerful than tradition." The audience's reception was overwhelming. Many people cried openly during the presentations, recognizing their own experiences in the shared stories. The question and answer sessions extended far beyond the scheduled time. A particularly touching question came from a teenager in the audience. "How did you deal with people who judged your family for being different?" Brandon answered, with the wisdom accumulated over decades. "We learned that people who judge happy families are usually struggling with their own family pain. Our job isn't to convince anyone, but to demonstrate that there are many valid ways to create love and security." The response generated spontaneous applause and became one of the most shared quotes on social media after the event. It demonstrated how the family had learned to protect their happiness without becoming defensive or closed off. In the following years, the family continued to evolve and grow. Emily Rose got married and had children, officially becoming Brandon's daughter-in-law despite their age difference of only 12 years. Her wedding ceremony was celebrated in the cave where it all began. Emily Rose's children grew up calling Brandon uncle and treating Barbara, Richard, Jennifer, and Walter as additional great-grandparents. To them, this expanded family was simply normal, demonstrating how family traditions can be established in just one generation. The annual tradition of visiting the cave continued, but evolved to include a weekend family camping trip. The third-generation children now played in the same place where Brandon had made his transformative discovery decades earlier. "It's funny to think this place used to seem scary," commented David, the twin, during one of the camping trips. "Now it feels like the happiest place in the world." His observation captured how places can change meaning when associated with positive memories. The cave had transformed from a symbol of painful revelation into a sanctuary of family celebration. During one of the camping trips, the older grandchildren expressed curiosity about what it would have been like if Brandon had never found the letters. The hypothetical discussion led to a deep conversation about fate versus choice, and how one decision can completely alter the course of multiple lives. "Maybe I would have been happy not knowing," Brandon admitted honestly, "but my happiness would have been based on ignorance. The happiness I have now is based on truth, which makes it more solid and lasting." His reflection offered a valuable lesson for the children about the difference between temporary comfort and genuine peace. Some truths may be uncomfortable initially, but they lead to a more solid foundation for long-term happiness. Jennifer, now in her 70s, often served as an informal counselor for young mothers in the community. Her unique experience of having given up a child and later rebuilding the relationship decades later offered valuable perspective. "A mother's love never dies," she used to say. "It can be redirected, it can be frustrated, it can be misunderstood, but it never completely disappears. It's the most persistent force I know." Her words comforted mothers who had made difficult decisions about custody, adoption, or separation. She demonstrated that even painful choices could lead to restored relationships when approached with patience and wisdom. Walter had become a father figure to many young people in the community, especially those from single-parent families. His experience of entering an already formed family made him especially sensitive to the needs of children navigating family changes. He organized weekend activities for teenagers, offering male mentorship combined with structured fun. Many of the youth who participated in his programs ended up doing better in school and avoiding risky behaviors. "Walter taught us that being a dad doesn't require DNA, just commitment," observed one of the teenagers during a community recognition ceremony. "He chose to love us when he didn't have to, and that means more than any biological father who just disappeared." Walter's impact demonstrated how people can find purpose by transforming their own experiences into service to others. His own journey of loss and family rebuilding equipped him to help others navigating similar transitions. Barbara and Richard, now retired, dedicated their full time to the Foundation's volunteer work. Barbara used her nursing experience to coordinate medical care for families in need, while Richard applied his accounting skills to help with family financial management. "Working at the Foundation gives us a chance to correct the mistakes we made with Brandon," Richard explained during an interview. "We can't change the past, but we can use our hard-earned lessons to help other families avoid the same problems." Their volunteer work had become a form of personal redemption. Every family they helped was an opportunity to apply the wisdom gained through their own mistakes and eventual correction. The foundation had evolved to include not only family mediation, but also educational programs for professionals working in adoption, support groups for various family configurations, and research on best practices in family truth-telling. Their studies had contributed to changes in state adoption policies, especially related to age-appropriate transparency and maintaining connections when beneficial for all parties involved. The David Harrison Foundation has changed how we think about adoption, said a state senator during hearings on legislative reforms. They have demonstrated that transparency and flexibility lead to better outcomes for all families involved. The official recognition validated years of hard work and demonstrated how a personal experience transformed into public service could create positive systemic change. At 50, Brandon reflected on how his life had unfolded in ways he could never have foreseen at 26. The young accountant who ran for shelter from a storm had become a national change agent in family matters. If someone had told me at 26 that I would become an adoption expert, I would have thought it ridiculous, he shared during an anniversary interview. It shows how our greatest tragedies can become our greatest contributions when processed with wisdom. His journey from personal pain to social impact offered inspiration to others who were struggling with their own challenges. It showed that suffering doesn't need to be wasted if it's transformed into service to others. The twins, now teenagers, had decided to pursue careers that complemented the family's work. David was interested in investigative journalism, inspired by the research skills his father had used to uncover the truth about their family. Nathan showed a talent for mediation and was considering family law. His naturally diplomatic personality and experience growing up in a complex family equipped him well to help others navigate family disputes. "Our children are carrying the legacy forward without us even asking," Rachel observed with pride. "They saw the positive impact that truth and love can have, and they want to create that kind of change in their own careers." The next generation was naturally embracing the values that had defined their family: honesty, flexibility, unconditional love, and service to others. These principles were becoming part of their own identity. During the 30th anniversary of the cave discovery, the family organized a 3-day symposium on families of the future, redefining love and belonging in the 21st century. The event attracted researchers, professionals, and families from across the country. The symposium included academic presentations, practical workshops, discussion panels with diverse families, and activities for children. It was a celebration of both Brandon's family's journey and the broader movement toward more inclusive definitions of family. "You started a national conversation about what family means," the keynote psychologist said during the event. "Your courage to live transparently has given permission for thousands of other families to embrace their own complexities." The recognition that their personal experience had contributed to broader cultural changes brought a sense of fulfillment Brandon had never anticipated. His cave discovery had become a catalyst for social transformation. During the symposium, several families who had been helped by the foundation over the years gathered for a panel on "Where Are They Now?" The outcomes were surprisingly positive, with most reporting stronger family relationships and greater satisfaction with their lives. A young adult who had been reunited with her biological mother through the foundation said, "What you gave me wasn't just an additional mother, but a model of how to face difficult truths with courage and compassion." Testimonials like this confirmed that the Foundation's work had created lasting impacts that extended far beyond individual cases. They were teaching life skills that would benefit families for generations. The event also marked the launch of a documentary series following several families served by the Foundation over 5 years. The films captured both the struggles and the successes, offering a realistic view of how family mediation works in practice. "We want to show that not every case has a fairy tale ending," the documentary director explained. "But even partially successful cases usually leave families in better situations than before the intervention." Honesty about varied outcomes increased the Foundation's credibility. They didn't promise miracles but offered evidence-based tools to improve family communication and understanding. The 30th anniversary also coincided with the launch of an online platform that allowed access to the Foundation's resources for families who couldn't participate in person. Technology had finally caught up with their outreach needs. "Now we can help a family in Alaska the same way we help a family in our own neighborhood," said Emily Rose, who had overseen the platform's development. "Distance no longer needs to be a barrier to accessing our resources." The digital expansion multiplied the Foundation's reach, allowing them to help thousands of additional families annually. Virtual therapy sessions, online support groups, and educational resources made their services accessible globally. As Brandon entered his 50s, he began thinking about succession and legacy. The Foundation had grown beyond his capacity for direct oversight, and he wanted to ensure it would continue thriving after his eventual retirement. Emily Rose was the obvious choice for future leadership, but Brandon was also developing other young leaders who could carry different aspects of the work forward. His personal experience had taught him about the importance of distributing responsibility and power. "I don't want the Foundation to depend on a single person," he explained during a board meeting. "The best legacies are those that grow and evolve far beyond their original founders." His approach to succession reflected the lessons learned about family. True love means creating independence, not dependence. He wanted the Foundation to flourish with new leadership, not just survive his absence. The succession plans included expanding the board of directors to include more people with lived experiences in complex family situations. The goal was to ensure decision-making always reflected the real needs of the families served. One of the most exciting innovations was a mentorship program where families who had successfully navigated complex situations were trained to support other families facing similar challenges. Peer support had proven especially effective. "No one understands an insecure adoptive parent better than another adoptive parent who has overcome those insecurities," observed Barbara during a planning meeting. "Our most painful experiences can become our most valuable resources for helping others." The mentorship program quickly became one of the most popular aspects of the Foundation's services. Families reported that talking with others who had faced similar situations was more helpful than traditional therapy in many cases. When Brandon turned 55, the family decided to create a special tradition. Each member would write a letter to be opened on the 50th anniversary of the original discovery. The letters would be kept in the cave box, along with all the other memories. "I want my future self to remember how I feel today," explained Nathan as he wrote his letter at 18. "I want to remember this happiness and gratitude, even if life brings new challenges." The Future Letters tradition created a new kind of hope and continuity. Each family member was consciously documenting their present feelings as a gift for themselves and future generations. David decided to include in his letter a list of questions about how the family had evolved. "Do we still gather every Sunday? Does Emily Rose still run the Foundation? Do the grandchildren know the full story? Have we found new family members?" His questions captured the natural curiosity about how family traditions persist and evolve over time. It would be interesting to see which aspects remained constant and which had changed in 15 years. Rachel included in her letter reflections on how marrying into an expanded family had shaped her understanding of love and commitment. She wanted her future self to remember the lessons learned about flexibility and acceptance. "I learned that loving doesn't mean completely understanding," she wrote. "Sometimes it simply means accepting and embracing complexities I will never fully understand." Her perspective as an outsider who became central to the family offered unique insights into how people can integrate into established family dynamics when approached with humility and an open mind. As the family continued to grow and evolve, one thing remained constant: the commitment to honesty, even when painful. Each new challenge was faced with the tools they had learned during the initial journey of discovery and reconciliation. "Our family proves that truths can hurt temporarily, but lies hurt forever," had become one of the family mantras, repeated whenever new dilemmas arose that required careful navigation between honesty and sensitivity. The Foundation's work had documented hundreds of family stories over the years, each one unique but connected by the universal themes of love, loss, discovery, and healing. Brandon often found himself amazed by human creativity in finding ways to love and care for one another. Every family we help teaches us something new about human resilience, he reflected during an interview on his 55th birthday. We think we're offering wisdom, but we usually receive as much as we give. This attitude of continuous learning kept Brandon humble, despite his recognition as a national expert. He genuinely believed that every family had unique wisdom to offer, regardless of how complicated their circumstances. The Foundation had begun collecting these stories in a digital archive that would be made available to future researchers interested in understanding how 21st century families navigated rapid social changes in definitions of kinship and belonging. We are documenting a quiet revolution in how people create and maintain family, observed a sociologist collaborating with the Foundation. In 50 years, researchers will use these archives to understand how our society redefined family love. The weight of documenting contemporary social history added additional meaning to the Foundation's daily work. They weren't just helping individual families, but contributing to the academic understanding of broader cultural changes. During an international conference on family and society, Brandon was invited to present on The Future of Family, Lessons from 3 Decades of Family Mediation. His presentation was watched by delegates from more than 50 countries. Families are evolving faster than our institutions can keep up, he told the international audience. We need policies and practices that support this evolution rather than resist it. His recommendations included greater flexibility in adoption laws, better training for professionals working with families, and educational programs that prepare young people for the diversity of family structures they may encounter. The invitation to influence international policy demonstrated how Brandon's personal experience had grown to have global implications. His individual story had become part of broader conversations about the social future. When he returned from the conference, Brandon found a special letter waiting for him. It was from a woman in Norway who had read about his story online and found inspiration to reconcile with the daughter she had given up for adoption decades earlier. Your story gave me the courage to face my own fears, she wrote. Now I have a beautiful relationship with my daughter and her children. Thank you for showing that it's never too late for truth and healing. Letters like this kept arriving regularly, reminding Brandon that sharing his personal experience had created ripples of impact that extended far beyond anything he could have imagined. Jennifer's 60th birthday was celebrated with a party that gathered not only the immediate family, but also many of the people whose lives had been touched by her story. The event demonstrated how one life can influence hundreds of others when lived with authenticity. During the party, Jennifer was presented with an album containing thank you letters from women around the world who had found inspiration in her journey from pain to healing. Many had made courageous decisions about their own family relationships after learning her story. I never imagined my pain could help so many people, she said with tears in her eyes. Knowing my experience brought healing to other families gives meaning to all the suffering I went through. Her reflection captured one of the most profound discoveries the family had made. Suffering processed with wisdom can become a source of healing for others. Their most painful experiences had transformed into their most valuable resources. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Brandon made the right decisions throughout his journey? We'll be happy to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.